introduction, a very brief introduction, which that's great. I'd like to thank, above all, John Plus, who I met several years ago in Jeda, and that was sort of a first contact with the world of German teachers, actually. And then later with Barbara, and for being invited by, or at least sponsored by two organizations within this larger Congress. I'll be talking today about, this is kind of a pastiche. I got a lot of different things I've brought together, and I hope it kind of makes sense. And there's a lot of material I've covered in other talks, so if you've seen me in the last few years, there might be parts of it and you say, oh, I've already heard that. That's fine. And you might, I only know about 3 jokes, and so you might repeat the jokes as well. So that's actually one of them. So anyway, so I'll just get started. I want to start off just to define a little bit political economy, give a very brief definition. And from there, I'm actually going to do a little bit of, you'll have quite a few visuals, and sort of bring you into my world and try to relate the political economy angle with some things that I'm actually living through. And then I'll move on to look at some language teaching issues. So it's quite long, the talk. There are quite a few, about 50 minutes, right? And then after 50 minutes, if there's anybody awake and or in the room, we can do some questions, right? That was my second joke, by the way. So you can see here, I've put up some, not photographs obviously, but you've got some images of Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and John Stuart Mill, as well as Marx and Engels. And again, the idea here, you have the sort of basics of what political economy is about, and sort of expanding on that a little bit, we can see a political economy as focuses on and analyzes the relationship between the individual and society, and between the market and the state. It also seeks to understand how social institutions, their activities in economics, capitalism for example, interrelate. And it focuses on the interrelatedness of political and economic processes and phenomena such as aggregate economic activity, resource allocation, capital accumulation, income inequality, globalization, and imperial power. So the idea is that we're not looking at very theoretical, only economics, if you like, and not looking certainly at quantitative economics necessarily, but looking at economics in society. And that's a very important point to make. And of course, the authors I previously cited, that's what they were about, and writing at a time when people were necessarily confined by, I am a sociologist or I'm an economist, right? So again, this foundational work is very important, and I've actually found it quite rewarding in recent years to go back and read things that are quite old, right? Finding that there aren't very many original ideas around today. A lot of these ideas were written long ago. So, geography. Jeda came up. So where is Jeda? It's not in Barcelona. You can see that's Barcelona. It's actually in the wild west of Catalonia, near the border with Aragon right there. There's France up there. And again, the commute out to that is about 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I go out 1 or 2 days a week. I do a lot of work from home, actually. So what I'm going to do now is sort of bring you into my world in Barcelona. All of you know Barcelona, I'm sure. Okay, please don't come to Barcelona, because there's no space for you. As you can see in these visuals, there we have the Sagrada Familia, which over the last 30 years has become so fat it doesn't even fit on the block that it's on. And it's full of tourists. And then you have Park Güell up here, which actually admission is charged. This is actually a very, very slippery slope because it's a public park. And yet the part where you have the Gaudí parts is actually the charge admission. That started about 3 years ago. You have the Pedrera, which is one of the buildings designed by Gaudí over here. And very famously, the Boqueria Market, which people say has so many tourists in it that there are actually no customers. And so you can't even take a photograph of a real Catalan person buying a piece of fruit or something because they're not in there. But kidding aside, there have been issues around this about overcrowding, and it's a big issue. And of course, there's an economic side to this. This provides quite a bit of money to Barcelona in times of crisis. But at the same time, there are lots of effects of tourism. I'm thinking of writing a paper about this and sort of shift fields a little bit, because the way the geography of the city is actually space is affected by the presence of tourism. So you have competitions over space between tourists and local people. But of course, there's a lot more to Barcelona than that. It's a real city, and so you could be in Barcelona, and you might coincide with a demonstration, something to do with cuts in education, for example, or you might even come across a home eviction. So in times of crisis, some of these images are all too common. There's also the issue of moving out of Barcelona, moving out of Catalonia. In the broader political sense, there are all the corruption scandals going on, which again are tied in with the economic crisis. And I thought I would relate this one to you just because it's so bizarre. It's unbelievable. This is Carlos Fabra, who was actually kind of a fixer for the local branch of the Conservative Party in the area of Valencia. This is his friend, an artist, whose name is Ripollès. And this airport was opened in 2011 and inaugurated by the head of the Valencian Assembly with Carlos Fabra. And with no sense of irony, they said, this is what Valencia needs, and yet there were no airplanes around. And to this day, there's not been one flight, I don't think. In fact, it's actually used by, it's one of 6 airports in Spain that actually don't have any flights. We could talk hours about that, but ask me about it later. But what is really, really bizarre about it is this. This is absolutely hideous. This is the work of this artist, and it's meant to represent Carlos Fabra. There is a little bit of a resemblance, I think. And the really strange thing about it was, there's a very interesting article in the newspaper, that he finished all of it except the airplane on the top. And then about a year later he went back. And again, this airport is open, but there's nobody there. So he goes back and is paid extra to stick the airplane on the top, which was kind of the coup de grace. And of course they said in the newspaper, it's an airport, he has to have an airplane on his head. If it was a train station, they would have put a train carriage on his head. So again, this is sort of like going on. I'm laughing about this, but it's actually quite serious stuff. He has ended up in prison, which is good. But now he's getting weekend. A very lenient judge has allowed him to go home at the weekend. And I don't think he'll be in jail for very long. But there is hope. In 2015, in fact a year ago, there were municipal elections. And we had the election of quite a few new mayors in the major cities. And a lot of people know about Podemos. Actually, none of these are members of Podemos. They're members of parties associated with Podemos. And so you have Ada Colau in Barcelona. You have Manuel Carmena, who's a retired judge in Madrid. You have Julio José Ferreiro in Coruña. You have in the city of Valencia. So these are like the 3 largest cities. Joan Ribó, and then you have José María González, who's an activist who goes by the name of Pichi in Cádiz. And you can go on and on. So again, a year later, what's happened? Again, these new parties, these new politicians are coming up against a great deal of resistance, but they're trying. But again, we have, since December, we had elections in December. Some people might know this. There haven't been in the form of government. And we've had our sort of city, the governments that was governing for 4 years has remained in power in a way, although they're not supposed to take any decisions. And this is kind of the power center in the Conservative Party. So you have our illustrious Prime Minister. Don't even ask me to talk about him. We have the Vice Prime Minister likely to take over after him, Soraya Sáenz de Santa María. Actually, I put the names up there at the bottom. And you have Cospedal in the middle, who's like the head of the Conservative Party. So these are the people sort of calling the shots in the Conservative Party. And, not very nice people, in my view. Right? But, again, also in Catalonia, we have the ongoing issue of sovereignty. And so every September 11th, the last 4 years, have been huge demonstrations. And I think in a way the organization that's doing this is probably able to get the most people out on the street of any organization in Europe. It's quite amazing. You get 1.5 million people out of a population of 7.4 million in the street, and that's pretty serious. And this was last September. And this is ongoing. And again, it's very complicated, but if you like, I can talk to you about it later. Probably after a couple of beers. Okay, so political economy, I mentioned earlier. Political economy is interesting because the angle I'm taking on it, and I think a purist might say, who are you to be doing this? But looking around, what you see is that political economy is taken up, or it's a filter through which quite a few people are thinking in different fields. Right? So you could go to sociology. It's a classic study by Borovoy, taking place in a factory. You could go to education. You have David Harvey, who's very well known as a geographer. You have Christian Fuchs, who in recent years has produced about 4 or 5 books. He works in London, and very interesting views if you're interested in the sort of interrelationship between communication, and particularly online communication, and Marxism. Very interesting stuff he's doing. Here we have a book sort of in the realm of anthropology about social movements. We have Zizek, who is a philosopher but writes about a lot of things. You have Wendy Brown, again looking at social theory. And I put this here not to be self-serving, but it's kind of what I'm trying to do. So you take sociolinguistics could also sort of wedge its way into this. And so we have all these different sort of disciplines, if you like, interrelated perhaps or not, and also all of them drawing on political economy or trying to make comments about political economy. So what we take from political economy, we have understandings of the current economic order, neoliberalism. I'll talk a little bit about that. Inequality, and then move to class and class-related phenomena. And here I will be covering material I've covered in talks and papers in recent years.